All right. I have several books in this update today, but unfortunately, they're not all the right books. Oh boy, let's get to it. Hi everyone, I'm Sandy and welcome back to my channel. If you like books and reading and impossible projects, then you have found the right place. I today have a 1001 book countdown for you. If you're not familiar with the 1001 book countdown, I will leave a card up here somewhere for you where you can go and check out the original video. But basically, I'm reading books off of the 1001 books you must read before you die list. So the impossible project, and slowly making my way through all of the books that are on all of the editions, which means I actually had 1,315 books to read. Absolutely massive project. I've just been documenting my way out here on YouTube over the last couple of years and have made so much progress since I started that. I love a big project. I love a big list, and I don't know why this project particularly has appealed to me, but I just am finding it so much fun just scratching things off of my list. Yeah, it's been great, even if all of the books haven't been the best books. But hopefully you consider giving me a subscribe and sticking around and seeing how long it takes me to get through this massive project. Yeah. What we will go ahead and do today is put up the numbers, which are 836, which is my main number out of the 1,315 books, and 4. Every year at the beginning of the year, I pre-select 52 books and I try and work through those, prioritize those to get that number down to 0. Just helps me feel like I'm making some progress and has an achievable goal, an idea of 1 per week. And as you can see, I have 4 left. 4. It's almost the end of the year. So it's a little concerning. But I do have a good update for you. But it's kind of an interesting one because I ended up reading several books, but not necessarily ones that are on the 2023 list. So let's go ahead and jump into the books. The first book that I have for you today is my book club pick. The 1001 book club for December was Nana by Emile Zola. This book was originally published in 1880. Emile Zola actually has several books on the count. I think 5 is what I had read. Unfortunately, this book, I did not realize, is the 9th book in a series. I typically, if there's a book in a series that is on this list, I like to read through them in order. And in this case, I did not do that. I didn't realize it. And unfortunately, I've also found out that the main character in this one of Nana actually makes her first appearance in book 7. And I do think that makes a difference for how I responded to this particular book. So Nana, in the beginning of this, is an actress and is on stage, and everyone is talking about Nana. Not always in the best terms, sometimes in really bad terms, but always very intrigued by this character of Nana, who shows up on stage, maybe not fully dressed in, and so very scandalous kind of behavior. Nana is also very clearly a prostitute, and she is doing what the author refers to as loitering. A friend of mine said actually that they thought that this where the first loitering laws came from was from prostitution and as a way to prevent prostitution, which I thought was really fascinating. But we get to see how Nana manipulates everyone in her life, the men, the women, how she's trying to get more money, how she's trying to keep, finding new ways of getting new income coming into her. And she's really kind of a devious character. And this is where I think not reading the books in order really harmed my experience of reading Nana. Because do I have the backstory for Nana? No. And is book 7 going to give me the backstory? Would it make me care about her a bit more and understand some of the choices she was making? Possibly. But unfortunately, the book was not a bad book. I actually really did enjoy the book quite a bit. I didn't get this connection to Nana that I wanted, especially at the end. I guess I expected to feel something more for Nana and what happened to her, what her future holds or doesn't hold, as the case may be. So yeah, it was unfortunate that I just didn't quite get pulled into her as much as I wanted. Really interesting book. I have 4 more of Zola's to read, including a precursor to this one. So we'll see if that makes me change my mind for how I feel about Nana. But with this book, we do get to go from 836 to 835, and it was on my 2023 list. So that number goes from 4 down to 3. Okay, not bad with the first book. The second book was not as much of a success. I will say that right off of the bat. It is Money by Martin Amis. And I didn't actually notice that there's a woman on the cover of this. I didn't actually notice that until I posted it on Discord, and then someone commented saying how kind of risque this cover was. It's like, oh my goodness, wow, that's very subtle when you're not paying attention. But Money by Martin Amis. Martin Amis actually also has 5 books on the countdown, so I will be reading 4 more by this particular author. This book was originally published in 1984. And it feels like 1984 with some of kind of the themes in it and everything. This book has a main character whose name is John Self, and he is a producer, filmmaker, not entirely sure. He wants to make a movie, is making a movie, he's trying to get money to make a movie, coming to New York, going to London, coming back, seems to be overly obsessed with hand jobs. That's one thing of it. And his girlfriend, which, sometimes he's getting along with, sometimes he's not getting along with. She's in London, he's in New York. It's all very odd. All of that I was okay with. The part where this book lost me, and it lost me in a very big way, was when the author, Martin Amis, inserted himself as a character into his own book. And in that particular case, I just did not get along with it. It was one of those things that I was just like, no, why are you doing that? And then not only was he in there once, he was in there multiple times. It's like, I don't understand why you're inserting yourself into this. And then the main character, whose name is John Self, is that supposed to be a reference back to himself? I'm not sure, but that combined with kind of the juvenile look of the women around him, it just all in all, I didn't like this book. I ended up giving it 2 stars. I was very frustrated by this particular book. I am glad that I read it, but I would not read it again. I think it's going to end up going on the outbound pile for me, on the unhaul pile, because I don't see myself ever reading this book ever again. So yeah, just kind of not the best. Didn't like the main character, didn't like the author putting himself in there. I think that's really the point where he lost me, was with that. So yeah, 2 stars, not very great. It is what it is. But with this book, we get to go from 835 to 834, and it was on my 2023 list. So I get to go from 3 down to 2. All right. So that sounds reasonable until you realize I only have, a week left before the end of the year. So yeah. But interestingly enough, I do have more books. So the next book that I have is this one, The Third Man by Greene. This book is actually a reread for me. I had put it on my TBR and then decided to pull it off of my TBR for December because I thought, I'm not going to have enough time. And then we went out of town for a week and I brought it with me because it's nice and small. And I thought, why not? I'll bring it with me. The other thing is this font is a very decent size. So this book is very short. And we have the main character whose last name is Martins come into town where he learns that his friend that he's visiting has been run over by a car, and there's this big mystery about who did it, and there's this idea of a third man, and who is the third man, and you're all tied up with all these characters and the women that's in it, and then who's who in this mystery, and who did what to whom. And it was actually very, very good. I read Brighton Rock earlier this year by Greene, and this was just kind of a delightful little read, very intriguing, lots of interesting characters, not very long, but still, who is the third man? I mean, that alone was really kind of a big hook that pulled me into the story. I really did like the character of Rollo Martins. I love that first name, or Rollo too. For me, that feels very old school. This book was originally published in 1950, so kind of that film noir-y kind of feel to it. It definitely had that. And I do know that there's an adaptation. In fact, the cover of this is from the adaptation. So I'm not a big fan of movie covers, but that one I think is really fun as well. So, but yeah, this book didn't take me long to read. I would say it's kind of in the 3 to 4 star range for me on the reread. I didn't remember a lot about what happened from when I read it before, but it was great for Remember December because I truly didn't remember anything about this particular book. But Rollo Martins is a fun character, interesting character. I just kind of very twisty, and I didn't necessarily figure out what the twist was. So I think that's also very, very good. But with this book, we get to go from 834 to 833, but it wasn't on my 2023 list. This was a reread. So that number stays at 2. Oh boy. Okay. I have one more book though. All right. The last book, my husband and I drove up to Whistler, British Columbia from the Seattle area, and it took a good amount of time going up there. And I asked him if he wanted to listen to an audiobook, and he said absolutely. So we actually listened to Tarzan of the Apes. This is a bind up of Tarzan of the Apes and The Return of Tarzan by Edgar Rice Burroughs. And so we listened to this, half of this audiobook all the way up to Whistler, and then the other half on the way back from Whistler. And it is just as good as I remembered it to be. I say that this is an easy 4 or 5 star read for me. I remembered from the beginning having an ending that was surprising. And I was still like, okay, now I agree with that still. I agree. I love the story of how Tarzan ends up on the beach, what happens to his parents, how he's raised and why he's raised by the apes in the jungle, everything that he learns while he's there. There's a little bit of having to suspend disbelief because of how he learns how to read. That's something that even my husband in the car was like, yeah, okay, that doesn't feel quite real. But how he and Jane relate to each other and how they communicate, I think is really fascinating. I loved their story in this. I loved how the ending happened. I will say too, it's really funny about this book, is I came home a few days after we got back, and my husband is sitting in our living room and he's reading something. I'm like, what are you reading? He's like, I have to read Return of Tarzan now because I have to find out what happens to the rest of the story. So he went on and read the second installment of this. I haven't read it. So, but very, very good. If you haven't read Tarzan of the Apes and you think you know the story, it's so much more involved than I remember it to be. I mean, I remember it from the book, but from comparing the story to what I know in like just comic books or in movies and things like that, it is so much more than that. And it is absolutely worth a really, really good read. It's not perfect. There are some issues with it, but it is an absolutely phenomenal read. None of the other Tarzan books are on the 1001 list. Only Tarzan of the Apes is. I do have The Return of Tarzan on my Read What You Own challenge, my physical TBR. So I would like to read that. I don't know when I'll get to it, but I would like to read it. But as I said, rereads do count on my countdown. With this book, we get to go from 833 to 832, but it wasn't on the 2023 list. This was an unplanned one. So that number still sits at 2, everyone. 2. So yeah, it is effective today. It is the 22nd when I'm recording this. It'll go up on the 28th. I have about 8 days to finish reading the last 2 books. One being Aaron's Rod by D.H. Lawrence, which I have started, but I'm only 30 pages in. And then The Black Prince by Iris Murdoch. Now, I have tried to start reading The Black Prince a few times and keep having to put it away because there's something that's just not pulling me in that particular story every time I've tried to read it, which is not good. But those 2 books are around 900 pages, which means I need to read about 100 pages per day in order to finish those. And I haven't been picking them up at all. I've been reading everything else, but not the books I'm supposed to be reading. So I don't know. We'll see. I'll have an update. I will definitely have an update next week for you where I will talk about the books. Hopefully I finished the last 2 and then talk about the project as a whole this year, how many books I actually ended up reading, kind of go through a little bit more about that next Saturday. But for today, that's what I have for you. Hopefully I can finish the last 2. Have you read any of these books? I'm amazed I had 4 books in the update. One was an audiobook, one was a short reread. But overall, it was a pretty interesting mix of different kinds of books. So yeah, but that's all I have for today. Wish me luck on the last 2. I just need to focus and actually read them. So, but as always, like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, everyone, thanks. Bye.